She reaches out. The girl who screams at every touch extends her trembling hand toward the woman beside her. Skin touches skin. 3 seconds, that should be impossible. Then she pulls away. How did this happen? Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. The scream started before Marcus Chen even reached the doorway. High-pitched, raw. The kind of sound that turned your insides cold and made you forget whatever you were thinking about. He stopped mid-step, his polished Italian shoes frozen on the marble floor, and listened as his daughter's voice tore through the morning quiet of the mansion. 7 years old, and Arya had been screaming like this since she was 2. The doctors had explained it, given it names, handed him pamphlets with smiling children on the covers that looked nothing like his daughter. Autism spectrum disorder with severe sensory processing difficulties, they said. Touch was painful to her, they said. She might never overcome it, they said. Marcus had stopped listening to what they said after the first dozen specialists. He'd heard it all before. Different words, same message. Your daughter is broken, and we don't know how to fix her. He moved toward her room anyway because that's what he did every morning. He stood outside her door and listened to her scream and waited for it to stop. His assistant James was already there, looking exhausted even though it was only 8 in the morning. The man had been with Marcus for 15 years, handling everything from hostile takeovers to Marcus's divorce 3 years ago. But nothing had prepared him for Arya. Nobody was prepared for Arya. The nurse they'd hired last month quit yesterday. The one before that lasted 2 weeks. The one before that made it almost a month before she packed her bags and left without saying goodbye. Marcus didn't blame them. He wanted to quit too sometimes, wanted to walk out of this massive house with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its temperature-controlled rooms, and its silence that was never really silent because of the screaming. But you can't quit being a father. That was the one job you couldn't resign from, no matter how badly you were failing at it. James cleared his throat, the way he did when he had bad news. Marcus, the new caregiver isn't coming. She called this morning, said she'd found another position. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd expected it. They all left eventually. The screaming continued from behind the door. It had changed pitch slightly, gone from panic to rage. Arya was probably trying to get dressed. Her clothes bothered her. Everything bothered her. The seams in her socks, the tags in her shirts, the feeling of her own hair against her neck. She lived in a world where her own body was her enemy. Marcus had spent millions trying to fix it. Specialists from Switzerland, therapists from Japan, experimental treatments that weren't even approved yet. Nothing worked. Arya screamed when anyone touched her. She screamed when she had to wear clothes. She screamed when the sunlight came through her window at the wrong angle. She barely spoke. And when she did, it was usually to repeat something she'd heard on one of her shows, or to recite numbers and sequences that meant nothing to anyone but her. The door opened, and their housekeeper Rosa appeared, looking frazzled. She's asking for the blue shirt, but the blue shirt is in the wash. I tried to explain, but she won't listen. She never listens. Marcus pushed past her gently. He'd learned years ago that anger didn't help. Nothing helped, but anger made it worse. Inside, Arya sat on her bed, her small body rigid, her hands covering her ears. She was wearing only her underwear, and she was rocking back and forth, that rhythmic motion she did when the world became too much. Her dark skin was covered in tiny scratches from where she'd clawed at herself, trying to escape the sensation of existing. Marcus stayed near the doorway. 5 feet away, that was the rule. Any closer, and she'd escalate. He'd learned that the hard way. Arya, he said softly. The blue shirt isn't ready yet. Can we try the green one? It's soft like you like it. She didn't look at him. She never looked at anyone directly. Eye contact was another thing that hurt her somehow. Another invisible knife the world kept stabbing her with. Her rocking intensified. Blue shirt, blue shirt, blue shirt, she chanted, her voice rising. Blue shirt, blue shirt, blue shirt. This was going to be a bad day. Marcus could tell already. On bad days, it took hours just to get her dressed. On bad days, she didn't eat. On bad days, he wondered if they would both survive until tomorrow. I'll get the blue shirt, he said, knowing it was impossible but saying it anyway. Just stay calm, sweetheart. Stay calm. But Arya wasn't calm. Arya was never calm. She started screaming again, louder this time. And Marcus backed out of the room because staying would only make it worse. In the hallway, Rosa was wringing her hands. "I can try to wash it quickly," she offered. "Put it in the dryer on high." Marcus shook his head. "It won't be dry enough. She needs it completely dry or she'll know. She always knows." James appeared again, phone in hand. "I have another caregiver agency on the line. They specialize in difficult cases." Marcus almost laughed. Difficult cases. That's what they called children like Arya. Difficult. Not suffering, not trapped in their own bodies, not living in constant agony from things other people didn't even notice. Just difficult. "Tell them we'll pay double the usual rate," Marcus said. "Tell them we need someone today." James nodded and disappeared down the hallway, already talking rapidly into his phone. Marcus leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He was 46 years old and he felt ancient. His ex-wife Rachel had left when Arya was 4. Couldn't handle it anymore, she'd said. Couldn't handle watching their daughter suffer. Couldn't handle the screaming. Couldn't handle the way their entire life revolved around managing Arya's pain. She'd moved to California and remarried and had another child, a normal child, and she sent birthday cards to Arya twice a year, with cheerful messages written in handwriting that looked like it belonged to a stranger. Marcus didn't blame her either. Sometimes he envied her. She'd escaped. He was still here. The screaming stopped abruptly. Marcus opened his eyes, tensed, waiting. Sometimes the silence was worse than the screaming because you never knew what it meant. Was she calming down? Was she hurting herself? Was she having one of her episodes where she just shut down completely and stared at nothing for hours? He moved back to the doorway carefully. Arya was still on the bed, still rocking, but she'd stopped screaming. She was humming now, a low sound that she made when she was trying to self-soothe. It rarely worked. Rosa appeared beside him with a shirt, not the blue one but a gray one that was similar. "Maybe this one," she whispered. "It's soft. It doesn't have tags." Marcus took it from her and stepped into the room. "Arya," he said, "look what I found." She didn't look. She kept humming, kept rocking. He laid the shirt on the bed next to her. "Careful not to get too close." "It's very soft," he said. "You can feel it if you want." She stopped humming. Her hand crept out slowly, touched the fabric, jerked back. She touched it again, lingered this time. Then she grabbed it and pulled it over her head in one quick motion, struggling with the sleeves, getting tangled, but refusing help because help meant someone would touch her, and touch meant pain. Marcus watched, his hands clenched at his sides, wanting to help but knowing he couldn't. She finally got the shirt on. It was backwards and inside out, but it was on. That was a victory. That was what counted as success in his world now. Rosa brought pants next and shoes, and they went through the whole process again. 20 minutes later, Arya was dressed. She looked like a tiny wounded thing. Her hair sticking up at odd angles because she wouldn't let anyone brush it. Her shoes on the wrong feet because she'd insisted on putting them on herself. But she was dressed. That was something. "Marcus," James called from downstairs. "The agency is sending someone. She'll be here in an hour. She has experience with autism. Lots of experience. They all had lots of experience until they met Arya." But Marcus didn't say that. He just nodded and turned back to his daughter. "Breakfast?" he asked. Arya was staring at the wall, at a spot where the sunlight made patterns. She didn't answer. She rarely answered direct questions. The words went into her ears, but they got lost somewhere between hearing and understanding. Or maybe she understood but couldn't figure out how to respond. The doctors weren't sure which it was. The doctors weren't sure about anything. "Come on, sweetheart," Marcus said. "Let's go downstairs." He started walking toward the door, knowing she would follow if she wanted to, knowing she wouldn't if she didn't. You couldn't force Arya to do anything. Force led to screaming, to self-harm, to days of regression where she wouldn't leave her room at all. He heard her small footsteps behind him and felt a wave of relief. She was following. That was good. That meant maybe she'd eat something today. Maybe today wouldn't be a complete disaster. Downstairs, the kitchen was bright and clean and empty. Marcus had let most of the staff go over the years. Fewer people meant less chaos, less noise, less chance of someone accidentally touching Arya, or speaking too loudly, or existing in a way that triggered her. Now it was just Rosa who came during the day, and a night nurse who sat in the hallway outside Arya's room in case she woke up screaming, which she usually did. Marcus had cereal ready, the kind Arya would sometimes eat, plain Cheerios. No milk, because milk had a texture she hated. He put the bowl on her special place at the table, the spot where she could sit with her back to the wall and see both doors. She needed to see the exits. She needed to know she could escape. Arya climbed into her chair and stared at the cereal. She didn't eat. She just looked at it, her dark eyes moving from one piece to the next like she was counting them. She probably was counting them. Numbers made sense to her in a way nothing else did. She could do complex math in her head, could memorize long sequences, could spot patterns in things that looked random to everyone else. But she couldn't tell you if she was hungry, or tired, or sad. She couldn't tell you if something hurt. She could only scream. Marcus sat across from her with his coffee. He didn't eat any more in the mornings. His appetite had disappeared somewhere around the time his marriage did. He just drank coffee and watched his daughter and tried to figure out what the day would bring. The doorbell rang an hour later. James answered it while Marcus stayed with Arya in the kitchen. He heard voices in the foyer, professional and polite. He heard James explaining the situation, using the clinical terms, the safe words. High needs. Nonverbal most of the time. Severe sensory issues. Requires specialized care. He heard a woman's voice respond but couldn't make out the words. Then footsteps approaching. James appeared in the doorway with a woman beside him. She was in her early 30s maybe. Black, tall and solid looking like someone who could handle herself. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a plain sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. But what struck Marcus was her face. She wasn't smiling the way most new caregivers did. That fake, cheerful expression that said they'd read a book about autism once and thought they understood. She just looked calm, observant, like she was taking everything in and making calculations. "This is Keisha Williams," James said. "She's worked with children on the spectrum for 8 years. Has excellent references." Keisha's eyes went past Marcus and landed on Arya, who was still staring at her cereal, apparently oblivious to the stranger in her kitchen, but Marcus knew better. Arya noticed everything. She just didn't show it in ways people expected. "Nice to meet you," Marcus said, standing. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice." Keisha nodded. She didn't walk toward Arya, didn't try to introduce herself, didn't do any of the things people usually did. She just stood there watching. That's when Arya looked up. Her eyes met Keisha's for a fraction of a second before darting away. It happened so fast Marcus almost missed it. But Keisha didn't miss it. He saw something shift in her expression, something he couldn't quite name. "She knows I'm here," Keisha said quietly. "That's good. That's a start." Marcus felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Hope maybe, or something close to it. He pushed it down. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and he'd had enough disappointment to last several lifetimes. "Let me show you around," he said. Explain her routine. Keisha followed him out of the kitchen, but she looked back once at Arya. Marcus saw it. Saw the way her eyes lingered, thoughtful and careful. It meant nothing probably. They all looked at Arya that way at first, trying to figure her out, trying to find the key that would unlock her. There was no key. He'd accepted that. The question was how long it would take Keisha to accept it too. He gave her the tour, showed her Arya's room with its blackout curtains and weighted blankets and shelves full of toys she never played with. Showed her the bathroom where every product was fragrance-free and hypoallergenic. Showed her the playroom that might as well have been a museum because Arya never went in there. Keisha didn't ask many questions. She just listened and nodded and occasionally jotted something down in a small notebook she pulled from her pocket. "She doesn't like to be touched," Marcus said as they stood in the hallway. "That's the main thing. Any physical contact causes her extreme distress. We've learned to maintain distance. We do everything through verbal cues and visual prompts." Keisha looked at him for a long moment. "Any physical contact?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Any at all. Even accidentally brushing against her can set off an episode that lasts hours. We've had to learn to be very careful. Keisha wrote something in her notebook. What about affection? She asked. Hugs, holding hands. Comfort when she's upset? Marcus felt his throat tighten. No, he said. None of that. She's never been able to tolerate it. Not from me, not from her mother, not from anyone. That must be hard, Keisha said quietly. For both of you. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't trust himself to speak. They went back downstairs. Arya was no longer in the kitchen. Marcus felt a spike of panic, that familiar fear that something had happened, that she'd hurt herself, or wandered outside, or simply vanished like smoke. But then he heard the sound of the television from the living room. She was watching one of her shows, probably. The same episodes she watched every day in the same order. Routine was everything. Deviation meant chaos. I'd like to try something, Keisha said. If that's all right with you. Marcus looked at her warily. Try what? Just observe her. Sit with her. Not interact. Just be present. See how she responds to my presence without pressure. It's a technique I've used before with children who have sensory issues. Marcus wanted to say no. He wanted to tell her that Arya didn't respond well to anything, that observation was pointless, that she should save herself the trouble and leave now before she got attached or hopeful or hurt. But he was tired. He was so tired of being the gatekeeper, the one who had to manage everyone's expectations and catch everyone when they fell. So he just nodded. Be careful, he said. And if she starts to escalate, back away immediately. Don't try to calm her down. It only makes it worse. Keisha nodded and walked toward the living room. Marcus followed at a distance, staying back, giving them space. He watched from the doorway as Keisha entered the room. Arya was on the couch, curled in the corner, her eyes fixed on the television where animated characters were singing a song about colors. She didn't acknowledge Keisha's presence. Keisha sat down on the other end of the couch, as far from Arya as the furniture would allow. She didn't look at the girl. She looked at the television, settling in like she had nowhere else to be, like she was just another person watching cartoons on a Tuesday morning. Minutes passed. Arya didn't move. Keisha didn't move. The cartoon played. Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the stillness. He was used to action, to intervention, to constant management. This passive observation felt wrong somehow, like they were wasting time. But Keisha seemed perfectly content. She watched the show. Once or twice she smiled at something on screen. She didn't try to engage Arya, didn't comment on what they were watching, didn't do anything at all, really. She was just there. And slowly, gradually, so slowly Marcus almost didn't notice it happening, Arya's body began to relax. The rigid tension in her shoulders eased. Her breathing, which was always slightly too fast like she was preparing to run, slowed to something more normal. She was still watching the television, but her awareness had shifted. She knew Keisha was there. She was allowing it. Marcus felt that dangerous hope rising again. He forced it back down. This didn't mean anything. Arya sometimes tolerated proximity if you didn't demand anything from her. It wasn't progress. It was just tolerance. But then Arya did something she never did. She glanced at Keisha. Just a quick look, there and gone in a second. But it was deliberate. It was intentional. Keisha noticed. Marcus saw her notice, saw the slight change in her posture. But she didn't react. Didn't smile or speak or try to capitalize on the moment. She just kept watching the television like nothing had happened. Smart, Marcus thought. Maybe this one was actually smart. The episode ended. Another one started automatically. Arya shifted position slightly, pulling her knees up to her chest. Keisha stayed motionless. Then Arya spoke. Not to anyone in particular, just spoke into the space between them. Blue is 570 nanometers, she said. Her voice was flat, reciting fact without emotion. Red is 650 nanometers. Green is 510 nanometers. Keisha turned her head slightly, not looking at Arya, but in her direction. You know about wavelengths, she said. That's pretty advanced. Arya didn't respond, but she didn't shut down either, didn't start screaming or rocking, She just went back to watching her show. Marcus realized he'd been holding his breath. He let it out slowly. In the kitchen, his phone was ringing. His phone. James, probably. Or one of his business partners who needed decisions about things that felt impossibly far away and unimportant. But he didn't move. He stayed in the doorway, watching this stranger sit with his daughter. Watching his daughter allow it. Watching something happen that he couldn't quite name but felt significant anyway. The morning wore on. Keisha sat. Arya watched television. Nothing dramatic happened. No breakthroughs. No miracles. Just two people in a room, existing together. And somehow that felt like more than Marcus had seen in years. When lunchtime approached, Keisha stood up slowly, carefully. Arya's eyes tracked her movement. "I'm going to go make a sandwich," Keisha said quietly. "Anyone else hungry?" Arya didn't answer. Marcus shook his head. Keisha disappeared into the kitchen. Marcus heard her moving around, opening cabinets, running water. She was comfortable, moving through his house like she belonged there. It should have bothered him, but it didn't. A few minutes later, Keisha came back with a plate. She had a sandwich cut into precise squares, some carrot sticks, and a handful of grapes. She sat back down on the couch, same spot as before, and started eating. She didn't offer any to Arya. Didn't suggest she should eat too. Just ate her own lunch and watched the television. Arya's head turned slightly. She was looking at the plate, at the precise squares of sandwich. Her hand moved, unconscious maybe, or maybe completely conscious. She was reaching. Marcus tensed. Keisha didn't react, didn't move the plate closer or farther away. She just kept eating. Arya's hand stopped halfway, hovering in the air. The internal battle was visible on her face. Want versus fear. Hunger versus the terror of interacting. Marcus had seen this same struggle hundreds of times. It always ended the same way. Fear won. But this time, Arya's hand kept moving. Slow, shaking but moving. She picked up one of the sandwich squares, held it, looked at it, put it in her mouth. Keisha took another bite of her own sandwich like nothing remarkable had just happened. Like she hadn't just witnessed something Marcus hadn't seen in over a year. His daughter had taken food from someone else's plate, had reached toward another person, had closed the distance. It was nothing. It was everything. Marcus backed away from the doorway before either of them could see his face. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and tried to understand what he'd just witnessed. Tried to figure out what it meant. Tried to remember how to breathe around the hope that was suddenly too big to push down. He found James in the office, working through emails on Marcus's laptop. The man looked up when Marcus entered, reading his face immediately the way he'd learned to do over the years. "What happened?" James asked. "Is everything all right?" Marcus nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. "I don't know," he said finally. "She ate something, from Keisha's plate. She reached for it herself." James's eyebrows went up. "That's good, right? That's progress." "I don't know," Marcus repeated. He felt unmoored, like the rules he'd built his life around were suddenly shifting. "Maybe. Or maybe it's a fluke. Maybe tomorrow she'll be back to normal, and this will just be another false hope to add to the collection." "You can't think like that," James said, but his voice was gentle. He knew better than to push. Marcus had been through this cycle too many times. Every new doctor who promised results. Every new therapy that was supposed to change everything. Every moment that looked like progress but led nowhere. "I'm going to work from home today," Marcus said. "Cancel my meetings. I want to observe. See how the rest of the day goes." James nodded and turned back to the laptop, already typing. Marcus returned to his position near the living room, staying out of sight but close enough to hear. The television was still playing. He could hear Keisha's voice occasionally, making small comments about what was on screen. Not to Arya specifically, just observations. "The colors in this show are really bright. That character reminds me of someone. I wonder what happens next." She was narrating her own thoughts, Marcus realized, giving Arya a window into how normal people processed the world without demanding that Arya respond or engage. It was clever. It was something none of the other caregivers had thought to do. The afternoon stretched out. Marcus tried to work but couldn't focus. He kept finding excuses to walk past the living room, to check on them. Each time the scene was similar. Keisha sitting calmly, Arya watching television, the space between them still there but somehow less hostile than it had been with others. Rosa brought snacks at 3 o'clock. Apple slices and crackers arranged on a plate. She set them on the coffee table between Keisha and Arya, then retreated quickly. This was the dangerous time. New food, unexpected interruption, change in routine. This was when Arya usually started to escalate. But she didn't scream. She looked at the plate, looked at Keisha, looked back at the plate. Then she picked up an apple slice and ate it. Just like that. Like it was normal. Like she did it every day. Marcus felt his chest tighten. James appeared beside him, having witnessed it too. They stood together in silence, watching Marcus's daughter do something she'd never been able to do before. Eat something that wasn't part of her rigid routine. Accept change without falling apart. When evening came, Keisha stood up and stretched. Her shift was technically over. Marcus had hired her for 8 hours and 8 hours had passed. He expected her to say goodbye, to leave like they all did, going home to their normal lives and their normal families and their children who could be touched without screaming. But Keisha walked into the kitchen and started making dinner. Marcus followed her. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Your shift is over." "I'm not doing it because I have to," Keisha replied, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator. "I'm doing it because I'm hungry, and I figure you probably are too. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Marcus couldn't remember. Days maybe. He'd been living on coffee and the occasional protein bar, eating when he remembered, which wasn't often. Keisha set a pot on the stove and started chopping vegetables. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She cooked like someone who'd done it 1,000 times, who found comfort in the routine of it. "Does Arya eat dinner?" she asked. "Sometimes," Marcus said. "If it's something she likes. If it's prepared exactly right. If the stars align and the universe decides to give us a break." "Which things does she like?" "Pasta," Marcus said. "Plain. No sauce, no cheese, nothing on it. Just noodles. And chicken nuggets. The frozen kind, cooked for exactly 12 minutes. And crackers. And sometimes fruit if it's cut a certain way." Keisha nodded, filing the information away. "What about you? What do you like?" The question caught Marcus off guard. No one had asked him that in so long. What he liked, what he wanted, what he needed. Everything had been about Arya for so many years that his own preferences had disappeared somewhere along the way. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Anything that's not out of a takeout container, I guess." Keisha smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I can work with that." She made stir-fry, vegetables, and chicken over rice. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and savory and alive. Marcus couldn't remember the last time his house had smelled like this, like someone actually lived there instead of just existing. Keisha made a separate small pot of plain noodles. No seasoning, no butter, nothing but pasta and water. When everything was ready, she plated the food and carried it to the dining room. Marcus followed with drinks, feeling oddly like a guest in his own house. Arya was still in the living room. Keisha didn't call her, didn't announce dinner or try to transition her. She just sat down and started eating. Marcus sat across from her and did the same. The food was good. Really good. He'd forgotten what good food tasted like. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Arya appeared in the doorway. She stood there watching them. Keisha didn't acknowledge her. Kept eating. Marcus forced himself to do the same, even though every instinct screamed at him to react, to manage the moment, to do something. Arya moved closer. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. She made it to the table and stood next to the empty chair. There was a plate there, the one with plain noodles. She looked at it, looked at Marcus, looked at Keisha. Then she sat down. Marcus's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Arya was sitting at the dinner table, with them, by choice. She picked up her fork, the plastic one they'd bought special because metal utensils bothered her. She twirled noodles around it clumsily and brought them to her mouth. She was eating dinner, with other people, like a family. Marcus had to look away. The emotion was too much. Too big. It threatened to spill out and he couldn't let it. Not here. Not now. He focused on his own plate and tried to keep breathing. Good noodles, Keisha said quietly. Just plain, the way they should be sometimes. Arya didn't respond, but she took another bite. They finished dinner together. All three of them. And when it was over, Arya went back to the living room without being prompted or directed. Like she'd done exactly what she wanted to do, and now she was done. Keisha started clearing plates. Marcus helped, bringing dishes to the kitchen, moving on autopilot because his mind was somewhere else entirely. At the sink, Keisha washed while Marcus dried. It felt domestic, normal. Absolutely surreal. How did you do that? Marcus asked finally. Do what? Get her to eat with us. To sit at the table. She's never done that before. Never. Keisha was quiet for a moment, scrubbing a pot. I didn't do anything, she said. I just made space for her to choose. You have to understand, Mr. Chen. Your daughter isn't broken. She's not deficient. She just experiences the world differently. Everything everyone's been trying to do, all the therapies and interventions, they're all about fixing her, making her more normal, more like other kids. But she doesn't need to be fixed. She needs to be understood. Marcus felt something crack open inside him. 7 years. 7 years of specialists and therapies and interventions. 7 years of trying to fix his daughter. And this woman, this stranger who'd been in his house for less than 12 hours, was telling him it had all been wrong. I don't understand, he said, and his voice sounded broken even to his own ears. Keisha dried her hands and turned to face him. Touch hurts her, right? That's what all the doctors say. But what if it's not about the touch itself? What if it's about the intent behind it? Every time someone touches Arya, it's to do something to her. Dress her, wash her, move her somewhere she doesn't want to go. Touch means loss of control. It means someone else is making decisions about her body without her permission. Of course she screams. Anyone would. But you saw her today. She reached for the food on my plate. She chose to sit near me. She closed the distance on her own terms, when she was ready, because she wanted to. Not because someone forced her or tricked her or manipulated her into it. Marcus stared at Keisha. The explanation was so simple, so obvious, and he'd never seen it. All the doctors, all the specialists, all the expensive experts from around the world, none of them had seen it. You're saying she needs agency? Marcus said slowly. Control over her own body, her own choices. Keisha nodded. Everyone does. But for Arya, it's not just a preference. It's survival. Her nervous system is wired differently. Sensations that other people barely notice feel overwhelming to her. The only way she can manage that is by having complete control over when and how things happen to her body. When you take that away, even with the best intentions, you're not helping her. You're confirming her worst fear. That the world is a dangerous place where she has no power. The words settled over Marcus like a weight. He thought about all the times he'd tried to help Arya, tried to comfort her during a meltdown by reaching for her, tried to force her to wear clothes she didn't want to wear because they were weather appropriate, tried to make her eat or sleep or bathe according to his schedule instead of hers. He'd been trying to help. He'd been making everything worse. I've been doing it all wrong, he said. The admission hurt. 7 years of doing it wrong, of making his daughter's life harder instead of easier. You've been doing your best, Keisha said gently. That's all any parent can do, but now you know better. So you can do better. Can you help her? Marcus asked. Really help her, not just manage her? Can you teach me how to do this? Keisha looked toward the living room where Arya was still watching television, oblivious to the conversation happening about her. I can try, she said. But you need to understand. This isn't about curing her or fixing her. It's about creating an environment where she feels safe enough to exist, where she can be herself without constant pressure to be someone else. That's all I can promise. It was more than anyone else had promised. It was everything. Keisha came back the next morning, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Within a week, she'd moved into one of the guest rooms, Not because Marcus insisted, but because she wanted to. Because something about Arya had gotten under her skin the way it had gotten under his. That desperate need to help this child who seemed so unreachable. The changes were small at first, microscopic. The kind of thing you could miss if you weren't paying attention. But Marcus was paying attention now. He watched everything. Watched the way Arya started to hover near Keisha more often. Not close, never close, but in the same room. Watching, learning, calculating distances and safety, and whether this person could be trusted. Watched the way Arya's screaming fits became less frequent. Not gone, not even close to gone, but less. Where before she might have 3 or 4 meltdowns a day, now it was 1. Sometimes none. Watched the way Arya started to eat more regularly, started to explore foods that weren't on her approved list. A strawberry here, a piece of toast there. Small victories that felt enormous. But the biggest change was something Marcus couldn't quite name. It was the way Arya looked at Keisha, like she was solving a puzzle. Like Keisha was speaking a language Arya was trying to learn. 2 weeks in, Marcus came downstairs to find them in the living room together. Keisha was reading a book aloud. Not a children's book, something about astronomy. She was explaining how stars were born and lived and died, using terms that seemed too complex for a 7-year-old. But Arya was listening, really listening. Her body was still, focused in a way it never was during the educational videos the therapist had recommended. Stars are like people, Keisha was saying. They're all different. Some are huge and bright and burn hot and fast. Some are small and quiet and last forever. Some are binary stars, 2 stars orbiting each other, keeping each other company in the dark. There's no right way to be a star. They're all important, all necessary. Marcus understood then. Keisha wasn't just reading to Arya. She was talking to her, telling her it was okay to be different, that different wasn't wrong. He backed away before either of them noticed him. Later that afternoon, James found Marcus in his study. "We have a problem," James said. Marcus looked up from his laptop where he'd been pretending to work. "What kind of problem?" Rachel called. "She wants to see Arya." Marcus felt his stomach drop. His ex-wife hadn't visited in over a year. Hadn't even called except for birthdays and holidays. When? This weekend. She's flying in Friday, leaving Sunday. She said she wants to spend time with her daughter. Marcus closed his eyes. Rachel's visits were always disasters. She came with expectations and hopes and a head full of ideas about how Arya should be, and when Arya inevitably failed to live up to those expectations, Rachel left disappointed, and Arya spent days in meltdown mode, confused and hurt in ways she couldn't articulate. "Tell her no," Marcus said. "Tell her now's not a good time." James shifted uncomfortably. "I tried. She said she has a legal right to see her daughter. She mentioned lawyers." "Of course she did. Rachel always mentioned lawyers when she wasn't getting her way." "Fine," Marcus said. "But I'm warning her. Things are different now. Arya's doing better, but she's still fragile. If Rachel comes in and disrupts everything we've built, I won't forgive her." "I'll tell her," James said. But they both knew it wouldn't matter. Rachel heard what she wanted to hear. She always had. Marcus told Keisha that evening after Arya had gone to bed. They were in the kitchen, Keisha making tea, Marcus pacing like a caged animal. "She's going to ruin everything," he said. "She'll come in with her big personality, and her perfume, and her need to hug and touch and mother, and Arya's going to lose it. All this progress. Gone." Keisha poured hot water over tea bags, calm and methodical. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it'll be okay. You don't know Rachel. She doesn't get it. She's never gotten it. She wanted a normal child so badly that she couldn't see the child she actually had." Keisha handed him a mug. "Then we'll prepare Arya as best we can. Talk to her about her mom coming. Give her control over the visit. Let her choose where they spend time, how long, what they do. Make it clear she can leave whenever she wants." Marcus took the tea but didn't drink it. "What if Rachel doesn't respect those boundaries?" "Then we'll handle it," Keisha said simply. "One step at a time. Remember?" Friday came too fast. Marcus woke up with a knot in his stomach that tightened as the day went on. He'd tried to prepare Arya, telling her that her mom was coming to visit, that it was okay if she didn't want to see her, that she could say no or leave or hide in her room. Arya's response had been to go completely silent. Not the normal silence, but something deeper, more withdrawn. She'd stopped eating, stopped watching her shows, just sat in her room, rocking slightly, processing information in whatever way her brain processed things. Rachel arrived at 3 o'clock in a rental car that was too expensive and too loud. She got out wearing designer clothes and heels that clicked on the marble entryway, and she smelled like expensive perfume from 10 feet away. Marcus met her at the door. "Rachel," he said, "keep your voice down. And for the love of God, don't try to hug Arya." Rachel's smile was tight. "Hello to you too, Marcus. It's nice to see you haven't changed. Can I come in, or are you going to make me stand on the porch?" He stepped aside. She walked past him, her eyes scanning the house like she was cataloging what had changed since she'd left. "Where is she?" Rachel asked. "In her room," Marcus said. "And before you go up there, we need to talk." Rachel turned, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. "Talk? About what?" "About the rules," Marcus said. "Things are different now. Arya's doing better, but she's still very sensitive. You can't just barge in and expect her to be the daughter you want her to be." "I know how to handle my own child," Rachel said coldly. "Do you?" Marcus shot back. "Because last time you were here, you made her wear a dress she hated because you wanted pictures, and she screamed for 3 hours. Rachel's face flushed. "I was trying to give her normal experiences." "Normal," Marcus said. "There's that word again. She's not normal, Rachel. She's never going to be normal. And the sooner you accept that, the better off everyone will be." They stared at each other, years of resentment and pain and failure hanging between them. Then Keisha appeared at the top of the stairs. "You must be Rachel," she said. "I'm Keisha. I've been working with Arya." Rachel's eyes moved over Keisha, assessing, judging. "You're the new nanny?" "Caregiver," Keisha corrected. "And teacher. And friend, I hope." Rachel's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How nice. Tell me, how is my daughter doing?" "She's making progress," Keisha said. "She's learning to trust, learning that she has control over her own body and choices, learning that the world can be safe if we make space for her to be herself." Rachel laughed, a harsh sound. "Making space. Is that what we're calling it now? When I was here, we called it giving up." "It's not giving up to meet someone where they are," Keisha said evenly. "It's respect." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Arya's door opened upstairs. They all turned to look. Arya stood in her doorway, wearing her blue shirt and mismatched socks, her hair unbrushed, her dark eyes taking in the scene below. "Mom," she said. It was just one word, but it was the first time in over a year that Arya had spoken directly to Rachel. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice breaking. Hi, sweetheart. I've missed you so much." She started toward the stairs, but Keisha held up a hand, stopping her. "Let Arya choose," Keisha said quietly. "If she wants to come down, she will. If she wants you to come up, she'll tell you. If she wants space, respect that." Rachel looked like she'd been slapped, but she stopped moving. Arya stood in her doorway for a long moment. Then she turned and went back into her room. The door closed. Rachel's face crumpled. "She doesn't want to see me." "She does," Keisha said, "but on her terms. Give her time." "How much time?" "As much as she needs," Keisha said. They waited. Marcus made coffee. No one drank. Rachel paced, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that was probably driving Arya crazy through the walls. Keisha sat on the bottom stair, patient and still. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Then Arya's door opened again. She came out carrying something in her arms. A stuffed elephant Marcus had given her when she was 3. She'd never shown interest in it before, but now she was clutching it against her chest like armor. She walked down the stairs slowly, watching Rachel the whole time. When she reached the bottom, she stopped 5 feet away. That was her safe distance. 5 feet from everyone. "Blue is 570 nanometers, Arya said. Rachel blinked, confused. "What?" "It's what she says when she's nervous," Marcus explained quietly. Wavelengths calm her down. Rachel looked at her daughter, this strange small person who'd come from her body but felt like an alien. Oh, Rachel said. That's interesting. Do you like science? Arya didn't answer. She just held her elephant and stared at a spot slightly to the left of Rachel's head. Can I sit down? Rachel asked. Arya didn't respond. Keisha translated. That's a yes. If it was a no, she would have left. Rachel sat on the couch carefully, trying to take up as little space as possible. Arya remained standing. You've gotten so big, Rachel said. And your hair. It's longer. Arya hummed slightly, that self-soothing sound she made. I brought you something, Rachel said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a wrapped package. Arya's eyes went to it, but she didn't move. Can I put it on the table for you? Rachel asked. Arya nodded, just barely. Rachel set the package down and backed away. Arya approached cautiously, like it might explode. She picked it up, felt the weight, shook it slightly. Then she tore the paper off with quick, efficient movements. Inside was a book. A big one with a glossy cover showing the solar system. Arya opened it, flipped through pages, stopped on one that showed a diagram of binary stars. She looked at Keisha. Like you said, Arya said, 2 stars. Together. Keisha smiled. Exactly like I said. Arya sat down on the floor with the book. Rachel watched her daughter, this child she'd carried and birthed and loved in the only way she knew how, even though it had never been enough. She'd failed Arya. She knew that now. Had always known it, but had been too proud to admit it. I'm sorry, Rachel said quietly, for leaving, for not being strong enough to stay. Arya didn't look up from the book, but Marcus saw her shoulders relax slightly. Heard the humming get quieter. I thought I was protecting myself, Rachel continued. I thought if I left, it would stop hurting so much. But it didn't. It hurt worse. Every day I'm away from you hurts worse. Arya turned a page. Another image of space, vast and dark, and full of light. You can visit, Arya said. Not to Marcus or Keisha or even really to Rachel. Just set it into the space between them all. When you want. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. The visit lasted 2 hours. Rachel didn't try to hug Arya, didn't try to touch her or force connection. She just sat and watched her daughter read the book, occasionally commenting on the pictures, being present without demanding anything in return. When Rachel left, Arya went back to her room without being told. Shut the door. Probably needed to decompress, to process everything that had happened. Marcus walked Rachel to her car. That woman, Rachel said. Keisha. She's good for Arya. Better than I ever was. You're her mother, Marcus said. That matters. But Keisha understands something I had to learn. That loving someone means accepting who they are, not who you want them to be. Rachel wiped her eyes. Can I really come back? As often as you want, Marcus said. As long as you follow the rules. Rachel laughed wetly. When did you become so wise? When I ran out of other options, Marcus said. After Rachel drove away, Marcus found Keisha in the kitchen. She was making dinner, something with chicken and vegetables. The ordinary routine of it felt surreal after the emotional intensity of the afternoon. That went better than I expected, Keisha said. Much better, Marcus agreed. He leaned against the counter, watching her cook. Thank you. For what? For teaching me how to be a father to my actual daughter instead of the one I imagined having. Keisha smiled. You were already being a father. You just needed some different tools. The weeks that followed were different. Marcus noticed it in small ways. How he didn't flinch anymore when Arya went silent. How he'd learned to read her subtle cues. The slight turn of her head that meant she was listening. The way her fingers drummed on her leg when she was processing. The particular pitch of her humming that meant she was content versus anxious. He'd spent 7 years looking for big changes, dramatic breakthroughs, miracle cures. He'd missed all the small ways Arya had been communicating all along. One evening, Marcus was working in his study when he heard music. Not from Arya's shows or her tablet. Someone was playing piano. He followed the sound to the rarely used music room. The piano had been Rachel's, one of the few things she'd left behind. Marcus had considered selling it a dozen times but never got around to it. Now Arya sat on the bench, her small fingers pressing keys. She wasn't playing a song, just hitting notes, listening to the sound they made. But there was a pattern to it. A rhythm. Keisha stood in the doorway beside him. "She found it this morning," Keisha whispered. "I've been letting her explore. She seems to like the lower notes. Sensory input she can control," Marcus said. "Understanding." "Exactly," Keisha confirmed. They watched Arya play for a while. Then Marcus did something he'd never done before. He walked into the room. Didn't try to get close to Arya. Didn't interrupt. He just sat in the chair near the window and listened. Arya glanced at him. Didn't stop playing. Just acknowledged his presence and continued. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then Arya stopped and looked at him directly. Her eyes met his and held for longer than they ever had before. "Do you like music, Dad?" she asked. The question was simple. The fact that she'd asked it at all was revolutionary. "I do," Marcus said, keeping his voice soft. "I like listening to you play." Arya nodded slowly. "I'll play more then." She turned back to the piano and started again. Marcus sat in his chair and cried silently while his daughter made music. That night, after Arya was in bed, Marcus and Keisha sat on the back porch. The air was cool, full of the sounds of evening. Cricket songs and distant traffic and the wind in the trees. "I need to tell you something," Keisha said. Marcus turned to look at her. She was staring out at the dark yard, her face unreadable. "What is it?" "I can't stay forever," she said. "You knew that, right? This isn't permanent." Marcus felt cold. He'd known, logically. But somehow he'd let himself imagine that it was. That Keisha would just be here, always, making everything work. "Why?" he asked. "Why can't you stay?" "Because Arya doesn't need me to," Keisha said. "She needs you. And you're learning. Every day you're getting better at understanding her, at giving her what she needs. Pretty soon you won't need me either." "I'll always need you," Marcus said, and he meant it in more ways than he could articulate. Keisha smiled sadly. "No, you won't. And that's good. That's the goal. For her to have a life where she's understood and supported, without needing someone to translate the world for her all the time." "I'm not leaving tomorrow," Keisha continued, "or next week. But eventually, Arya's going to need more than just us. She's going to need school, friends, experiences outside this house. And we need to prepare her for that." The thought terrified Marcus. Arya in school, with other children who wouldn't understand her, with teachers who might try to force her to be normal. "I don't know if she's ready," Marcus said. "She won't be if we don't start working toward it," Keisha replied. "She's 7 years old. She deserves more than just this house, as beautiful as it is. She deserves a life." So they started working toward it. Slowly, carefully. They practiced transitions, going from the house to the car to short trips to quiet places. Coffee shops in the morning when they were empty. Libraries where Arya could be as quiet as she wanted. Parks where she could run and climb without anyone telling her how to play. Each outing was a negotiation. Arya choosing where to go, how long to stay, what to do. Some days went well. Some days ended in meltdowns in parking lots. Marcus and Keisha standing at a respectful distance while Arya screamed herself out, waiting for her to come back to them. But slowly, Arya's world expanded. She learned that outside could be safe if she had control over when and how she experienced it. She learned that new places weren't threats, just different environments with different rules. She learned that she could handle hard things if she had people who respected her boundaries. 3 months after Keisha had arrived, Marcus enrolled Arya in a special program. Not a school, not exactly. More like a learning collective. 6 children total, all neurodivergent in various ways, all learning at their own pace with educators trained in acceptance rather than compliance. The director was a woman named Sandra who spoke softly and moved slowly and made no sudden demands. She met Arya in their home first. Let Arya observe her for weeks before suggesting that Arya might like to visit the space where other children learned. Arya's first day, Marcus drove her. Keisha sat in the back with Arya, narrating what they saw out the windows, keeping things calm and predictable. The building was small, converted from an old house. There were quiet rooms and loud rooms, and a sensory room with weighted blankets and soft lights. Children could move between spaces as they needed. Arya stood in the entrance for 15 minutes before taking a single step inside. No one rushed her. No one told her what to do. They just waited. When she finally moved, she went straight to the sensory room, crawled under a weighted blanket, and stayed there for the entire first session. The second day, she ventured out to watch the other children. Didn't interact, just observed from her safe distance. The third day, she sat at a table where a boy was building something with blocks. Didn't help, didn't talk, just sat nearby. By the end of the month, Arya was attending 3 times a week. She didn't speak to the other children much, but she was present. She was learning. She was existing in a social space without constant screaming. It was more than Marcus had ever dreamed possible. Rachel visited every other weekend now. She'd learned the rules, learned how to be with Arya without demanding more than Arya could give. Sometimes they just sat in the same room, Rachel reading while Arya played. Sometimes they looked at books together, Arya pointing out facts about space or animals or whatever had captured her interest that week. Once, Arya let Rachel sit next to her on the couch, not touching, but close. Sharing space. Rachel cried after, overwhelmed by what seemed like such a small thing but felt monumental. 6 months after Keisha had arrived, on a random Tuesday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. Arya was in the living room with Keisha. They were watching a documentary about volcanoes. Keisha was folding laundry, a domestic task she did while Arya watched her shows, just existing in the same space. Arya got up from the couch, walked over to where Keisha sat. Stood there for a moment, uncertain. Keisha looked up, waiting. Then Arya did something she had never done. She reached out her hand and touched Keisha's arm. Not a brush, not an accident. A deliberate touch. Her small fingers rested on Keisha's forearm for 3 seconds. Then she pulled back and returned to the couch. Keisha's eyes were wide. She looked at Marcus, who'd witnessed the whole thing from the hallway. He couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just seen. His daughter had touched someone on purpose, had initiated physical contact, had proven that it wasn't impossible, just required the right circumstances, the right person, the right level of trust and control. Later, after Arya was in bed, Marcus asked Keisha how it felt. That touch, the first one Arya had ever chosen to give. It felt like trust, Keisha said quietly, like she was saying she knows I won't hurt her, that she's safe. Are you? Marcus asked. Safe? From me, I mean. Am I safe? Keisha met his eyes. You're learning to be. That's what matters. The year turned. Fall became winter. Winter became spring. Arya turned 8 years old. They celebrated with a small party, just the 4 of them. Marcus, Keisha, Rosa, and James. Arya wore a dress she'd picked out herself, one with a specific texture she'd deemed acceptable. She didn't want a cake because cake was too messy, too unpredictable. Instead, they had plain cupcakes with no frosting, and she ate 2 of them. Rachel sent a gift. The telescope Arya had been talking about for months. Video called to sing happy birthday. Arya didn't sing along, but she smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes. Progress was still slow. There were still hard days. Days when Arya couldn't tolerate clothes or noise or existing at all. Days when she screamed for hours for reasons no one could determine. Days when Marcus felt like they were sliding backward instead of moving forward. But there were more good days than bad now. Days when Arya laughed at something on television. Days when she asked questions about the world. Days when she chose to be near people instead of hiding from them. On one of those good days, Marcus found Keisha packing her things. He'd known it was coming. She'd been talking about it for weeks, about how Arya didn't need her as much anymore, about how Marcus had learned enough to navigate his daughter's needs, about how it was time. But knowing something intellectually and facing it emotionally were different things. "You're really leaving," Marcus said from her doorway. She looked up from the suitcase on her bed. "I'm not leaving. I'm moving into my own place. 10 minutes away, I'll still visit, still be part of Arya's life. But she's ready for this transition. You both are." "I'm not," Marcus said. He'd spent months not saying it. But now that she was actually packing, he couldn't keep it in. "I'm not ready for you to go." Keisha set down the sweater she'd been folding. "Marcus." "I know," he said. "I know this is professional for you. I know you're her caregiver and this was always temporary. But somewhere along the way it became more than that. For me at least. And I need to tell you before you leave because if I don't, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Keisha was quiet for a long moment. "It's not professional for me either," she said finally. "It stopped being professional months ago. I care about Arya. And I care about you. But that's exactly why I need my own space. Because if this is going to be something real, it can't be confused with my role in Arya's life. It has to be separate, clear. We need to choose it consciously, not just fall into it because it's convenient." Marcus understood. She was right. She was always right. "So you're leaving but not leaving. I'm creating healthy boundaries so we can figure out what this is without it being tangled up in my job." "Okay," Marcus said. "I can work with that." They moved Keisha out the next weekend. Arya helped, carrying small boxes to the car, her way of processing the change. That night, Arya came to find Marcus in his study. "Can Keisha come for dinner tomorrow?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "I'll ask her. Will you be okay if she says no?" Arya considered the question seriously. "Yes, because she'll come a different day instead. She's not gone, just gone from here." "Exactly," Marcus said. His 8-year-old daughter had just articulated healthy relationship boundaries better than most adults could. Keisha came for dinner 3 times that week, started dating Marcus officially the week after. They moved slowly, carefully, making sure Arya was comfortable with every new development. Their first kiss happened 4 months later, in Marcus's kitchen after Arya had gone to bed. Keisha had come over to discuss Arya's progress at school. Somehow they'd ended up washing dishes together, laughing about something stupid. And Marcus had turned to say something and she'd been right there. And it had just happened. It felt right. Like everything else Keisha had brought into his life. It felt like something Marcus hadn't known he needed, until he had it. A year after Keisha had first walked into his home, they took Arya to the beach. It was a bold move. New environment, new textures, unpredictable elements. But Arya had been asking about the ocean. She'd seen it in documentaries, read about it in books. She wanted to know what it felt like. They went early in the morning when the beach was empty. Gave Arya control over every aspect. She could stay in the car if she wanted, could watch from a distance, could leave whenever she needed to. Arya stood at the edge of the parking lot for a long time, watching the waves. Then she took off her shoes, walked across the sand in her bare feet, stood at the water's edge. Marcus and Keisha hung back, letting her experience it at her own pace. A wave came in, touched her toes, retreated. Arya laughed, a bright, clear sound that carried across the empty beach. She looked back at them, her face full of delight. "The water is cold," she announced. "And it moves. Everything moves here." She waded in deeper, up to her knees, spread her arms wide. Marcus felt his chest expand with something too big to name. Joy, maybe. Or pride. Or hope. Or all of it together. Keisha took his hand. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. They both understood what this moment meant. 2 years ago, Arya had screamed when anyone touched her, had lived in constant terror of her own existence, had been trapped in a world that felt hostile and overwhelming. Now she was standing in the ocean by choice, laughing at the sensation of cold water on her skin, experiencing something new without fear. She wasn't cured. That wasn't the goal, and never had been. She was still autistic, still had sensory issues, still needed accommodations and understanding and patience. But she was free. Free to be herself, without constant pressure to be someone else. Free to explore the world on her own terms. Free to choose connection, instead of having it forced on her. They stayed at the beach for 2 hours. Arya collected shells, examined tide pools, buried her feet in the sand. When they finally left, she was exhausted but happy. She fell asleep in the car on the way home, her hand clutched around a piece of sea glass she'd found. In the rearview mirror, Marcus watched her sleep. His daughter. His strange, beautiful, perfect daughter who'd taught him that love wasn't about fixing people. It was about accepting them, understanding them, making space for them to be exactly who they were. He glanced at Keisha in the passenger seat. She was looking out the window, smiling slightly, lost in her own thoughts. She'd given him this understanding, this acceptance, this life where he could be a father to his actual daughter instead of grieving for the one he'd imagined. "Thank you," he said quietly. Keisha turned to him. "For what?" "For everything. For seeing Arya when everyone else just saw problems. For teaching me that she didn't need to be fixed. For staying even when it was hard. For leaving when she needed you to. For coming back. For all of it." Keisha reached over and squeezed his hand. "You did the hard part. You changed. Not everyone can do that." They drove home in comfortable silence. When they got there, Marcus carried Arya to her room. She woke up enough to change into her pajamas by herself, brush her teeth, climb into bed. "Dad," she said as he was leaving. He stopped in the doorway. "Yeah, sweetheart. I like the ocean. Can we go again?" "Whenever you want," Marcus promised. Arya nodded, satisfied. Then she did something unexpected. "Come here," she said. Marcus approached cautiously, stopped at his usual 5 feet. Arya sat up and patted the edge of her bed. "Closer," she clarified. Marcus moved closer. His heart was pounding. Arya reached out and touched his hand. Just for a moment. Just long enough to make contact. Then she pulled back and lay down. "Good night," she said. "Good night," Marcus whispered. He backed out of the room, closed the door softly. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and let himself feel everything. All the fear and pain and struggle of the past 8 years. All the progress and change and hope of the past year. All the love he'd always had but hadn't known how to express in ways his daughter could receive. Keisha found him there, put her arms around him and let him cry into her shoulder. "It's going to be okay," she said. "It already is," Marcus replied. And he meant it. Because okay wasn't about Arya being normal. It wasn't about her being fixed or cured or changed into someone else. Okay was about acceptance, understanding, love that didn't require her to be anything other than exactly who she was. They'd built that, together. And it was more than okay. It was everything. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.